I'm Molly Scott-Cato and I'm the Green MEP for South West England and Gibraltar.
So Molly, what does Brexit mean to you personally?
I just think Brexit's a tragedy on every level. I mean, personally I'm heartbroken about it. I think it's trashing our country's reputation. I think it's really limiting the opportunities for young people in the future, including my own children, and I think it's destabilising our continent and the world in a way that really threatens the peaceful kind of existence that I've enjoyed and which I hoped future generations would enjoy.
In your opinion, can Article 50 be revoked? And if so, how?
This isn't my opinion. I know for a legal certainty that if the government decides to revoke Article 50, it can do that unilaterally, and then we remain in the EU on the same terms and conditions we have now. So we're still the people. We have a parliamentary democracy. If our representatives reflect our will, which has now changed against Brexit, they can instruct the Prime Minister to withdraw that letter, and we will then remain in the EU.
And just a quick follow-up to that, do you think at this stage we've burned too many bridges? Do you think the EU would be happy to take us back, or do you think they'd be reluctant?
I can say very clearly from Brussels that leading politicians from across Europe are keeping the door open. Although they've accepted that Brexit has to go ahead if British people want that, they also understand that opinion's changing. They watch the polls very carefully, and they know that although they would survive us leaving, it would damage the EU, and so they would certainly make it possible for us to stay.
What does Theresa May's Chequers deal mean to you? Do you think it's workable?
The Chequers deal is a kind of really bizarre fudge, and it's only thinking about Conservative MPs. So it's an attempt to bridge the differences within the Conservative Party, fairly unsuccessfully, I would say, but it hasn't taken any account of what the basic rules of the European Union and the single market are. So essentially it's a negotiation inside the Tory party. It's not a realistic platform to negotiate with Europe, and it just breaks some of the fundamental rules of the single market. It will be like the European Union deciding to change its rules for a member that had left. Why would anybody do that? Why would you change the rules of a club after somebody had left the club? It just makes no sense at all.
I've heard it said that the UK wants the benefits of Norway with the obligations of the Canada deal. Is that a fair breakdown of
I think it's worse than that, really, because Norway is a small country and it's always accepted that it's not able to sort of throw its weight around in Europe, and that's why it decided not to join. We're trying to basically bully Europe into doing what we want while also leaving. So, I mean, this is just a disastrous strategy. If we want to leave, then we should leave, but we should then negotiate with the bloc as it is, not try to sort of change it in our leaving. That's a very misguided way to negotiate. It's insulting as well, actually.
Isn't this whole Brexit thing just a preamble to selling off the National Health Service to America, slashing our food safety and environmental standards, imported imported chicken, for example, but goat's heads from Australia or something? Does this worry you?
There are lots of agendas driving Brexit, and I've tried to explain what they are on a couple of websites. One's called the Bad Boys of Brexit and the other one's called the Brexit Syndicate. And there are various wealthy, powerful people driving this agenda. So we've got people that basically want to stop us tackling climate change because they've got money in fossil fuel industries. We've got people who are just financial speculators. We've got people who don't want to pay their taxes. We've got people who don't like regulations. There's a nasty sort of constellation of special interests there who are really behind Brexit, and we're actually funding the campaigns and manipulating media and so on so that people voted to leave. So, you know, Brexit would work in their favour, but they're less than 1% of the population, and that's why I think it's really important to stop it, because effectively what they're doing is buying democracy. It's not a democratic decision. It's a decision that works for a tiny minority of people and that they've effectively bought.
Good Friday Agreement is a peace treaty registered with the UN. Would Brexit mean by default, therefore, that the UK is breaking an international treaty? And if so, what are the implications of this?
I'm not entirely sure about whether Brexit breaks international law. I mean, I'm not legally expert enough to say about that, but I think the decision to leave the EU was very irresponsible in terms of our historic relationship with Ireland. I raised this myself during the campaign and was told by Conor Byrne, who's was formerly Boris Johnson Foreign Secretary's special advisor, that this was nonsense. There was no implications for Northern Ireland at all. So the Brexit people really played this down. But immediately the decision was taken. There were suggestions of a border poll, and the interesting thing is that it appears that the unionists in the north are more concerned to keep their close relationship with the South than they are to keep their relationship with the UK. So although the DUP, which is now basically part of supporting this appalling government, although they are very strongly against Ireland becoming a bloc, their voters actually prefer that to losing that very close connection with Ireland. So it just means that Brexit, it is putting pressure on the peace process, but it's probably putting more pressure on the United Kingdom Union.
And as a follow-up to that, why do you think, you said that you spoke about Northern Ireland, but I certainly didn't hear very much about it during the campaign. Why do you think Northern Ireland, now that we know it's such a big thing, why was it neglected in the campaign in 2016?
Well, the campaign was very poorly run, I think, by both sides, and I think the journalists were abysmal. And most journalists don't have any understanding of European politics. It's complex, multifaceted. They'd rather just focus on gossip at Westminster, quite honestly. There are honourable exceptions, but I think the level of knowledge amongst people engaged in that campaign and amongst journalists was, historically poor for such a big decision. And I think one of the advantages of having a people's vote now is that what we should have known when we voted for the first time, we know a lot more about now. And so, this idea that we could sort it all out in an afternoon has clearly been shown to be complete nonsense. And all the issues that were sidelined and all the lies that were told, like about Turkey and, the EU stealing your cuppa and stuff, nobody's going to believe that the second time around. So that, I think, is why people are changing their minds, why we see today 60% support for remaining in the EU now. We're seeing growing momentum for the people's vote. And I really believe we can turn this around and vote to stay in the European Union.